This is the CrowdCrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project with your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On this show, we get into the crux of how to raise money successfully on Kickstarter, on Indiegogo. How do you get the funding that you deserve for your project? How do you get those resources, get people bought in, get the eyeballs, the attention? All of that I cover on this show, and I try and do that by bringing people, real-world individuals that are right now in the trenches, raising money on Kickstarter. And this happens every single day. You can go and browse different crowdfunding platforms out there, and you will see that literally projects are blowing up every single day. And I see this, and I'm like, why isn't it that it can't be yours? You know, why is it that you can't just take some of the strategies that these people are using and employ it in your own campaigns? And that's where the genesis of this show is me getting frustrated, man, seeing all these successful clients that I have, seeing all these successful students, and then also seeing people that on Kickstarter that are raising tons of, $1 million and more. And I'm like, what are they doing right? So it's always my hunt, if you will, to try to get to the crux of it and to try to figure out what these people are doing in order to have a successful campaign. And hopefully some of those things you will be able to replicate in your own. So I urge you to take notes. If you don't in this listening to this show, it's a great way to just remember things and to force your brain to kind of recall some of the facts that you're learning as you're going through these episodes. In addition, if you don't want to take notes and you just kind of want all the notes provided for you, you can go and pick up a copy of the Kickstarter launch formula. I have a lot of great content there in that book. You can get a paperback version or an Audible version. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That will take you to Audible, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. Or you can just search the Kickstarter launch formula on Amazon and you can pick up a copy there if you want a paperback or an ebook version. That's kind of like got all the notes pretty much laid out for you if you don't want to hunt around and try and figure it out yourself. But also, one of the cool things about this show is we see so many different types of entrepreneurs and creative types who are successfully raising money. So for example, today's podcast, you're going to discover how someone who has a bit more of a creative slant on their business and on their products is able to still command a lot of attention and a lot of funding dollars with their crowdfunding campaign. And literally their business is built on the back of successful crowdfunding campaigns. So this is the reason why they're able to do what they love full time. Is their last project raised $200,000 on Kickstarter in the publishing category. Something that I think is really difficult is storytelling and getting people interested in that, getting consumers interested in an indie publishing project. They're able to do this successfully, not once, not twice, but 10 times successfully on Kickstarter. It is insane. I think you're going to learn a lot, even if you're interested in the business side of things. A lot of great tips were shared on actually how do you, if you are a creative type, assemble a business around what you're trying to do, have a step-by-step proven plan going forward. I think you're going to like this episode a lot, and I hope that you also enjoy some of the insights that come out of it. At the end of this episode, I will share with you a way to work with me if you're interested, if you want to get in contact with me, and we can go from there. Without further ado, without further hype, let's get into today's podcast episode. Hey, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. We have a double round interview here for you where this creator actually has been on the podcast before for Beehive Books, and they've come back to share some advice and tips with their current campaign, which has thus far attracted more than 600 backers, over 200,000 raised. Welcome, Joshua. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Salvador. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Could you tell listeners a bit about this current project that you're working on, and just give us a bite-sized sense of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project is called Dracula: The Evidence, and it's this sort of insane experimental box set edition of Bram Stoker's classic novel Dracula. For any listeners who maybe have never read Dracula, it's a really interesting book beyond what everyone knows about it from seeing the movies, about the sort of gothic horror trappings of it. It presents itself as a series of found documents. So when you read Dracula, what you're reading is people's journals and letters and newspaper articles that are all supposed to be this sort of archive of materials that all relate to the sort of mysterious phenomenon of this vampire. So I read that book when I was a teenager, and that presentation was really cool to me. I felt kind of voyeuristic, how you're sifting through these old materials. So I always thought it would be cool if you could actually see the genuine materials. So we're making an edition of Dracula that's not a book; it's a briefcase full of handwritten letters in envelopes, people's diaries and journal entries, newspaper clippings. There's a part that's supposed to be the doctor has these recorded audio notes that he makes about all his patients. So we're pressing a record, and that'll go in the box. So to listen to read the book, it's like this multimedia experience where you're exploring this sort of research archive in this briefcase, or depending on which edition you get, briefcase or box.
You're kind of discovering the story as you go. I love the Entombed edition too. That looks really cool. I'm not sure if that's made of marble or what, but it looks really cool.
Yeah, it's made of stone. It's made of engraved stone. And it's just the most elaborate thing we've ever done. I mean, we have these 3 editions where the basic one comes in a suitcase. Then we have one that comes in an oak casket, and then one that comes in a stone vault with the oak casket inside. And so, yeah, the Entombed edition, we were only doing 26 of those. I honestly didn't know whether we would be able to sell any of them because they're very high-end and expensive. They go for $2,000 each. We only produced 26, and we've sold 24 so far, so I think we're going to sell out all 26.
That's incredible, man. Congrats.
It really blows my mind. And really opens some ideas for stuff we can do in the future with these really high-end editions.
You have such
stuff like that really helps some of our more mass market projects, too, because it gives us a little extra funding to do.
You have such a unique take on storytelling. Like if we go back through your 10 other projects or so, they're all very different in nature, and they all tell stories in such different ways. I've never seen a publisher that kind of has that type of approach. Was that something you kind of wanted to do from the outset, or is that just kind of where your mind goes, being interested in these different types of campaigns?
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm very interested in unusual novel reading experiences, different ways of looking at books, and I love classic literature, and I love art history, and I love stuff that engages with these things in some way, but gives you some new window into it that sort of brings it into the present and brings it into this really vital physical object. So yeah, a lot of our books involve looking at classic literature in new ways. A lot of our books involve sort of archival research where you're sort of rediscovering forgotten histories and stuff. We do these monographs about great forgotten artists. And then we do just sort of interesting experimental graphic novels and magazines. And yeah, I just like stuff that feels different from everything else, stuff that's sort of singular. And I love books as sort of art objects and how you have to sort of look at them and figure out what they are, figure out how to read them. Stuff that sort of makes you stop and be there with the thing, that really pulls you into the world of its own.
It's like you said, an immersive experience, and it goes a layer deeper than just reading a novel. You're really getting to interact in some way kind of with the story. And
right.
I just think that's so fascinating. I've never seen anything like that,
I appreciate that. It's very exciting to me. And yeah, this is by far the most insanely immersive experience we've created. It's not like any book we've ever done. But in a way, I look at all of our books that way. The goal is for all of them to be entirely immersive experiences, even if they're just a book that you read, through the design and through the presentation and through the content. It's supposed to be something that that pulls you sort of deeply into its world. Mm-hmm. And this is a really extreme example of that. And it's just the kind of thing that excites me.
I want to get into some of the things that you've learned doing these crowdfunding campaigns, but before we do, one of the questions that I had for you was, if you're talking with someone else out there at a coffee shop and you're like, hey man, I want to start a business that, shares literature and stories in a novel way, people usually kind of laugh you off, because you don't think like books and business, or you don't think like starting a publishing company nowadays. That seems really difficult and almost insurmountable. What has it been like for you running a business that sort of has this kind of sort of like artistic, but also immersive thing at its core?
Well, I mean, it's been, it's a hard business, publishing, but it's been a great thing for us. And really the only reason we're able to do it is because of these crowdfunding mechanisms, where sort of a lot of stuff that would really not work through traditional publishing mechanisms. I mean, books that are strange sizes, books that are weird formats. We do newspapers, we do gigantic books. We do this book, which is not even a book. It's like a weird box. Like it would have no home in a bookstore, in any kind of traditional bookstore. So stuff that is so weird that it really wouldn't work through mainstream publishing mechanisms, through this crowdfunding mechanism, sort of flips, and the weirdness of it that would make it so unsaleable traditionally becomes the selling point of it, because it's something people have never seen before. It's exciting. They like to talk to their friends about it. Like, people like to share like this cool project because it's a little different. And that's what excites me about being a publisher. It's like, I look at publishing as kind of an exercise in the possible. Like, the point of being a publisher is a platform, basically. And if your platform isn't giving voice to stuff that doesn't have someplace else to stand, there's no reason for it to exist, really. Mm-hmm. And so what excites me is doing projects that I feel like we're the only ones who can really do them because of how we're positioned, and the people that we work with, and the readership that we have, and our business model. So we have this very unusual, for a publisher, a basically crowdfunded business model is very rare. There's a few publishers that do it, but not many. And so it's sort of all driven by the business model. That's what makes it possible. And these are very expensive projects. They're largely kind of high-end, expensive books, and the printing costs are really high. Mm-hmm. And we would never have been able to.
Yeah, crowdfunding. It seems like,
and if it doesn't sell, you go out of business.
Yeah, it seems like crowdfunding has really kind of enabled that for you guys. Is this your full-time gig, or are you doing something on the side also, or is this your full-time?
Yeah, other kinds of work on the side. I do some freelance writing and editing and stuff like that. But this is my living, basically. I mean, I spend 80% of my time working on Beehive these days.
That's awesome, man.
I mean, I love it. It's I don't make a ton of money. It's sometimes hard to scrape by, and it can be chaotic. Some months you're doing better, and some months you get almost nothing. But I feel so blessed that I get to wake up and work on these books every day. I just get so excited about it.
Since our last interview, I mean, you had a few campaigns under your belt. What are some of the things you've been learning with your more recent campaigns when it comes to the process of crowdfunding? What's been working for you? What hasn't? I just would love some of your insights there.
Well, honestly, what's worked best for us, it's so inverted. It's like the crazier we get, the more it seems to work. And sometimes the more traditional things that we try don't work quite as well. So it's like the things that seem like pipe dreams. It's like these seem to be the projects that pay off and that make a lot of money and that people really get behind. So it's like, I mean, it's this weird enabling thing where you keep doing more projects that you're like, I don't. This seems crazy. Like this doesn't even seem like something we can really pull off, and it works. It just gives you more gumption to try more insane stuff. The thing we've never really been able to do is draw a large audience to any of these books. What we've done well with some of the high-end editions is, like, we have a very committed audience that will really get behind some of these projects, and they'll get the collector's edition versions, the special limited versions that sell for more. So we can get a fair amount of funding to do these very labor and production intensive things. But what I would like to be able to figure out how to do is sell 5,000 copies of a $20 book. 10,000 copies of a $20 book. That's some we've never been able to grow our audience to that size. We have this like relatively small but intensely committed audience. So that's sort of that's part of the challenge that we've tried to figure out if we can hybridize those things a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, looking at your projects, a lot of them have 500 backers, 800 backers. It's pretty consistent that people are showing up for each of these campaigns. You've raised like $30K with the last one, the original Painter of Women in Power. The other ones $35,000, etc. This one just kind of blew it out of the water. I think probably because some of those higher price rewards that you were offering there.
Right. Yeah, we've raised almost 50,000 just from those Tomb editions, and so it's not necessarily that more people are backing this campaign. It's just we've gone sort of higher end, and we did get a lot of really nice support and got really press. But yeah, so it's I mean, we have our audience is a pretty consistent size. Our goal is to try to grow it, but we sort of seem to always be within that 500 to 1,000 people range on Kickstarter. And so we also have book trade distribution, so our books are in bookstores and stuff. So we have customers that sell Kickstarter too.
Do you think that having the higher amount, in your eyes, does that seem like more success, or is that to you just saying, okay, now we have more responsibility? Like you look at this 200K campaign, and that's, to anyone outside, that's a massive success, right? And you hit your goal like in the first week and a half or thereabouts, right? Yeah. Is this like a new level for you, or were you expecting even to do that amount?
Well, it's the most we've ever raised on a crowdfunding campaign. We've done a lot of campaigns, and we've gotten pretty close to this level before. I think our biggest one ever was 180,000. But yeah, we've never raised this much before, and it's for a book that's very expensive to produce. So it feels like less money when you're on the inside and you see all the numbers and you realize how much of that you just hand right over to your printer, and how much it's going to cost for these heavy box sets and stuff. But it does feel like a major success. I mean, it's just a lot of funding for this crazy project, and we get to really do it right. Like if we had raised 140, which was our goal we set, we would have been able to do it, but we really would have had to be very, very careful about what we spent, and we would have had to make a lot of hard decisions about what kind of paper stock we want to use and what one sacrifice means that we can't include another thing. But at this level, it's like, okay, I mean, we still have to be careful and thoughtful and budget everything, but we can really do it in style. We can really do this project exactly in our heads, the way that we think our readers will enjoy it the most. So it feels great. It's incredibly exciting, and it feels like it opens windows to more stuff we can do in the future.
Totally. When I look at your project, like some of them are very different. Like this one is all about the story of Dracula. The other one I'm going to totally mispronounce this. It's Artemisia, the original Painter of Women in Power, a graphic biography of trailblazing old master and 17th century pioneer feminist art. Like I wouldn't think that the people that back this previous project would be also interested in the new one, but it seems like that's not the case. Is most of your community kind of filtering over through these different projects? Like they're finding out about it, I guess, from your newsletter or from your social media and such?
Yeah, I would say we have a small core of people that pretty much back every project that we do. That core is very small. Maybe it's 100 people or something like that. And then we have like a larger audience of about 2,500 people that are consistent customers, but they don't back every project. So they might back 2 or 3. And, we have a large mailing list that we've curated over the years of about 10,000 people. And that's where most of our customers come from. And then for every project we do, there's usually 300 people that back it that have never backed something we've done before. And so they sort of get added to our audience. So yeah, it's a sort of mix. I mean, I think our stuff all fits together somehow. A lot of it is very engaged with history in some way and bringing history into the present. But not all of it. I mean, there's it just sort of fits together in a sort of sensibility sense. And so I sort of hope it all ties together into some overarching vision, but we're interested in a lot of stuff. And so it's not hyper focused on like one type of book or one sort of material.
I had one other question related to that, but before we did, I just wanted to, before I forget, one of the things that has been captivating my attention a lot has been AR, augmented reality. And even just going to networking events and seeing people's business cards having like AR is so fascinating to me. And I could totally see like incorporating that in some way into your publishing project could be phenomenal. And
I would love
that would be so cool, man. That'd be so cool.
Yeah. I like that kind of stuff too, like those weird AR games and stuff. And like, it would be really cool if we could,
especially with Dracula, like that'd be dope.
Yeah, that could be really interesting. Or to do something with like a sci-fi book that had like more of like a cyberpunk aspect to it would be really interesting.
Yeah, I could definitely get behind that.
Brings it into the real world. I think that could be super fun.
Were you finding people from Kickstarter itself also continuing to discover your projects? Have you noticed that to be more or less or about the same with the other projects you've been doing?
Every project we get a lot of new backers just straight from Kickstarter. And that's largely because Kickstarter itself as an organization has been so supportive of what we do. I mean, they almost always put our projects on their weekly newsletter, which that newsletter is unbelievable. I think it has an audience of 10 million people or something like that. And we always get, 100 backers just straight from that newsletter. And with this project in particular, they've been all over the place just promoting it. And, they've put us on all kinds of different promotional things that they've sent out. So that's always a good pipeline of new customers for us is just the Kickstarter mechanism itself.
Very cool. Well, I think I gotta introduce you to a killer resource, The Gadget Flow. Their website reaches more than 28 million people per month. Brands like DJI, HP, and Pioneer have used them to increase awareness and boost sales, along with more than 4,000 crowdfunding campaigns. They have a new unboxing series on YouTube where you can get your product unboxed by a tech expert. Lastly, you can get feedback for your crowdfunding campaign and increase conversions by using Crowd Insight. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com. Definitely demonstrate a lot of really interesting creative energy with these different projects. For those out there in the audience that kind of have that same creativity you do, but they're not sure how to really execute on it. And I think that's a very common problem of like people who are very creative sometimes find difficulty dotting the I's and crossing the T's and like putting together the plan. What's like one bit of advice you could lend them on the business side of things, of assembling either a team around you, or how do you get these massive projects? Like, how do you pull that all together?
Well, it's like step one for anything like this, and it's a laborious step, is like you have to cultivate an audience for it. You can have like the coolest idea in the world, and if you don't have a way of reaching people, it's going to be hard for it to go anywhere. Like, I mean, I think people can be a little starry-eyed about like reaching people on Kickstarter if they just have like a really cool project that will blow up on Kickstarter. And that does happen from time to time. It's not out of the question, but it's really rare. And I think what you have to do is like figure out how you're going to reach the people who want this thing. Build an email list. It's like I was in the comic industry for like 7 years before I started building an email list. And it's like one of my biggest regrets that I let all these people get away. I thought like if somebody follows you on Facebook, that's great. It's not. All that stuff is useless. They just want money from you. Get everyone's email and like cultivate that audience. And when like you have a project that's going to appeal, like find like-minded people who are interested in the stuff that you're interested in, and find their audiences and work with them and collaborate with them, and figure out who are the people that want your stuff. I feel like that's the biggest step that gets missed, and it's the biggest reason that cool projects fail. If a project can fail because it's bad, and a project is bad, it probably never had a chance. But a lot of times there are projects that are really incredibly interesting and cool, and they don't work because people don't have a plan for how to reach the audience. And that's the hardest to do, but it's something you have to consider.
We talk a lot about like online marketing, but what about offline marketing? I think there's kind of a unique opportunity where if you have a comic book or a board game or a book or something, more experientially related, you can do offline marketing. Did you ever experiment with that with your projects?
Well, I mean, honestly, our biggest source of customers, I think, maybe Kickstarter after these years has become our biggest source of customers. But for a long time, our biggest source of customers was just meeting people at comic conventions. I mean, I used to be more of like a mainstream comic publisher. I used to own a comic book store in Philadelphia. That's how I got my start in books.
Comic book guy from The Simpsons?
Exactly. Exactly. And so, yeah, we used to publish books through the shop, and we would take them to comic conventions all over the country and all over the world. And so we just met people that way, and we sort of entered the comic book industry, and that gives you a web of contacts who are going to share your stuff and who are going to promote your stuff because, you know, they're cartoonists who have a fan base already, or they're writers or publishers that have been doing this longer than you have and have more of an established presence. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the core of everything, was really just going out there and showing our books to people and meeting people and doing author events. And it's the old stuff still works. I think it works better than social media.
I think so too, because people now don't even expect to get like a personal introduction and talking to people and networking and face to face. So it really does leave an impression. And it's also a way you can build an email list, honestly. You can have a list of people that they're interested. They can put their name and email there too, so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone.
That's what I wasn't always doing in the beginning, and it's so stupid because that's the best. You connect with someone in person, and then you get their email, and you keep them updated on what you're doing, and they'll follow you for years. They might become a customer who buys every book you ever do, and those people are solid gold. You know, they're like the foundation that you can build a life on, and a platform to continue doing this really interesting work. So yeah, you have to treasure those people, and you have to connect with them as much as you possibly can. And yeah, I'm a big believer in the offline and the personal, calling people if you can call them, and getting to know who your customers actually are. I always invite our customers to come visit us in our office. You know, I consider our customers are the reason that these projects are possible. Like, people look at some of these books we do, and they think that we're some kind of wizard because we were able to do this very luxe, expensive thing. And the only reason we were able to do that is because we had all this money. It's like not that hard to do when you have lots of money to spend.
You need the resources.
The only reason money is because customers got behind it. So it's like they're the ones who actually make these things possible. They're your like co-creators in a certain sense. I always try to look at them that way, as a sort of fellow travelers, like making this stuff possible out there in the world.
Yeah, it's more of a partnership than you're trying to like sell things to people. You're trying to create with them almost. Right. As a side note, that's pretty awesome that you owned a comic book store. There was actually a comic book store I would go to all the time when I was little in the town I grew up in, and the guy was literally like comic book guy from The Simpsons. It was so funny. It was called
such an architect.
I know,
all over the place.
It was called Three Trolls. It was a great little shop. I totally missed that.
Where'd you grow up?
It was in Massachusetts, like in a really small town in Massachusetts.
I love it. The classic small town comic book shop.
Yeah. One of the other takeaways it looks like that you had here was this idea of really trying to be simple and clear with your reward tiers. And I think this is actually a huge stumbling block for many people out there, is overcomplicating those reward tiers. Yeah. What did you mean by that, in that trying to clearly explain the reward tiers?
Well, that's something it's taken so many projects to learn. Like, I have a terrible compulsion to overcomplicate everything, and especially our reward structures and stuff. You always get carried away with like how much cool stuff you can make, and you want to do cool stretch goals, and you want to add a thing, and then people ask you if they can add the thing, but they don't want the other thing. They want the pin, but they don't want the print. It just like becomes such a logistical nightmare when you have to fulfill stuff and you end up having to customize every package. And I'm slowly, painfully weaning myself off this, like, I'm just sort of a maximalist, as you may be able to tell from some of our projects. I like things.
You got ambition, man.
Hyper detailed and are exploding with cool stuff. So like, and my partner Maëlle is very similar in that sense. And she has such a generative creativity. She's always like coming up with like cool extra things we can do, and like we should do this and we should do that. And like, I've been slowly trying to be like, okay, we'll do there'll be 3 different editions at 3 different price points, and they won't be customizable, and they won't have 9 different things that you can add on to them, and We don't have to do a print and a sticker and a postcard and a pin and like all this stuff, and you just end up, people get confused. You end up having to re-explain things a million times, and the worst part is the fulfillment. It's just so time consuming. And yeah, the last project that we fulfilled was this big monograph we did about this artist named Harrison Cady. We're literally just wrapping fulfillment on that right now. I'm sending out the final packages, and it's been so much easier than it's still, like, fulfillment sucks. It's so time consuming and it's so mindless. So it's still super not fun. It's never fun. But it was so much less of a nightmare than most of our previous projects, because we had it sort of planned out and simplified and not overly customized. And that's what I'm trying to do with the Dracula thing too. Just keep it straightforward. Here's what you get. Like, you order it if you want it.
It's kind of finding a balance between having a great experience that you can offer your customers, while also something that's not going to, make you end up in the red, and also going to allow you to fulfill on that experience. Because you can promise lots of great stuff, but you also have to deliver those things. Otherwise, it really hurts your customers. It really hurts your employee morale. All that. It's kind of finding that balance, I think, a bit, which is always difficult to do.
We've delivered in the past. It's just how much of a toll did it take on us, and how much did it hurt our bottom line? And so it's just trying to simplify, and it also confuses your customers is the other thing. It might be cool if you have all these extra things, but like, I think people's heads spin a little bit when they have to scroll through a list of 60 possible rewards that they might get.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a better customer experience to just sort of be able to conceptualize, okay, here are my options, here's how much I want to spend, here's what I get, rather than have to make a lot of complicated decisions.
Mm-hmm. One of my last questions for you here is, you've done a lot of projects over the years. You've launched a lot of different types of books. Your experience when it comes to the publishing industry. I think a lot of people out there sometimes will give advice like you should start small with a project, and you should really just try and get something under your belt. Do like a small campaign, raise 10K or 20K, and not be super ambitious. Other people like you, I see them like kind of being overly ambitious almost. What do you recommend for the beginner who it's their first project? Should they be trying to swing for the fences like you are? Should they be doing something small? I'm really not sure what you're going to answer, but I'm kind of curious.
Well, I'll tell you what I did. The first project I ever wanted to do was a swing for the fences kind of project. It was before we launched Beehive. It was back when I still had my bookstore with my two partners, Andrew Carl and Chris Stevens. And the three of us created this project, which was called Little Nemo Dream Another Dream. It was a tribute to a great cartoonist named Winsor McKay, and his old comic strip Little Nemo. And it was this super ambitious book. We had like over 100 cartoonists who were going to be in it, and it was 16 by 21 inches, which is just like insanely massive book. And it was going to be $150, and it was we needed to raise like $60,000 to do it, and it seemed very daunting, but I knew it was something I wanted to do and that we were planning to do. So what we did before that was we did a very small Kickstarter just to get a handle on how I'd never done a Kickstarter before. So I didn't want our first project to be this high profile, big money thing that was going to be, it was going to have a lot of eyes on it because a lot of the cartoonists in it were really famous and well known, had a big following. So I knew it was going to be a high stakes kind of high wire act doing this project, and I did not want that to be our first venture into Kickstarter. So I did a very small Kickstarter. I used to do this quarterly magazine, which was like a comics anthology magazine that we published out of our shop. And so I just did a $2,000 Kickstarter to raise money for one issue of that magazine. And it was great. We raised like $2,500 or something, and I got to see how Kickstarter works and how what some of the pitfalls of it are. And I'm very glad I did that, and I think it made our next project better. I think I could have maybe started with the Little Nemo project and jumped right in, and maybe it would have still gone great. I don't think I necessarily had to do that, but I think it was the right decision. I don't see any downside in starting small just to get your feet it doesn't mean you can't have a big idea that you're working on at the same time. Just don't have to start on Kickstarter with that one.
Yeah. So basically kind of assess what you feel comfortable with, what you can deliver in terms of your promises, and maybe if it's your first one, kind of dipping your toes in the water before you go super big. But also, I mean, I imagine it also depends on the entrepreneur, the person, the creative type there. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of these great tips. Do you have anything else you'd like to leave with the audience?
No, this has been great. I appreciate you having me back. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Definitely. And where should people go to learn more? You looks like you have 5 days to go at the time we're recording this.
Yeah, so you can just go to beehivebooks.com/Dracula. That'll link you to the Kickstarter page. And if you want to learn more about Beehive Books, you can just go to beehivebooks.com. We've got all kinds of info on there. You can look at our past books and our past projects.
Yeah, side note, I love the artwork on some of your books here. It's almost like something you'd want to kind of display, like either on your bookshelf or on your coffee table. It's something you want to kind of leave out. Like the artwork is really beautiful.
Yeah, I look at them almost, they're like pieces of furniture as well as literature. Like a lot of times people see that some of our books are so big, they're like, where the hell do I put this? I'm like, you display it. You like have it out somewhere. Maybe it sits on the floor or on a table. It's like you can see the cover. They really give like a space, like an interesting energy. Mm-hmm. They're just cool artifacts and magical objects, and I appreciate that. I love. I mean, I'm such a good collector.
Well, awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these great tips. And I appreciate also you kind of getting a bit more, I think, raw into what it's like to run a publishing business, and as well as some of your insights when it comes to the creative side of things. So I appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much, and I look forward to watching some of your new projects come out.
Thank you so much, Salvador. It's nice to talk to you.
Shipping and mailing from your desk has never been simpler than with SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes. With SendPro Online, it's just click, send, and save for as low as $4.99. That's $4.99 a month. Schedule package pickups and track shipments from departure to arrival. And for being a CrowdCrux listener, you'll receive a free 30-day trial to get started and a free 10-pound scale to ensure that you'll never overpay. Just go to pb.com/CrowdCrux to access this special offer for a free 30-day trial plus a free 10-pound scale to get started. That's pb.com/CrowdCrux to experience shipping made simple with a free trial of SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Hey, I really appreciate it. This episode had a little bit of like audio issues, I'd say, audio quality issues, and it's not always going to be perfect. I try to get the best interviews that I can for you, and sometimes just honestly, the guest on the other side of the line doesn't always have the best microphone, or they're not in the best environment, or I'm not sometimes, so I really appreciate it when you are able to bear through with me with the audio quality. I do try to edit it and make it as good as possible for you, but this episode I think was a little bit a little bit more difficult when it came to the audio quality. Aside from that, I hope you took a lot away from today's podcast episode. We have a lot of other episodes out there for you to listen to binge listen to if you want to. If you can stand my voice that much, you can listen to 3 or 4 of these. I think you will actually learn a ton just seeing some of the guests in different insights, different stories, the ways they came up with their product, how they got attention, got the word out, got funding, all these different things you can find on this podcast. And in addition, if you kind of want want a cheat code on us, like you're playing a video game and you're like, okay, I can go through level 1, 2, 3, 4, and eventually I'll get to the boss. Instead, if you want a cheat code that's going to help you accelerate getting to that boss and defeating the boss and rescuing the princess, you can do a one-on-one coaching call with me, and I'll pretty much do a brain dump and share with you for your specific project, for your specific category, for what it is you're trying to do, the strategy you should have going forward, the things you're doing right, the things you're not right, and really try and draw your attention to also some of the resources out there that might help. I'm not always available for these coaching calls as well, so you have to select them from my calendar when it comes to my availability. But the link for that is crowdcrux.com/coaching. crowdcrux.com/coaching. And before you do the call, if you haven't yet read the Kickstarter launch formula, that is a great place to start. A lot of bedrock information when it comes to how to successfully smash your goal with a crowdfunding campaign. You can check that out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That will take you to the Audible version of the Kickstarter launch formula. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and I will see you next time.